Gene is the president and co-founder of Farm Sanctuary. A lot of you guys already know this, but if you don't, here's his stuff. He's been hailed as the conscience of the food movement by Time magazine, and since the mid-1980s, Gene has traveled extensively campaigning to raise awareness about the abuses of industrialized factory farming and our system of cheap food production. His thought-provoking book, Farm Sanctuary, Changing Hearts and Minds About Animals and Food, examines the ethical questions surrounding food production and exposes the mistreatment of billions of farm animals who are exploited for food in the United States every single year. The good news is he has a new book coming out for us to read. Gene has the new book coming out April 7th, right? It's called Living the Farm Sanctuary. Here it is. I've got my own copy. Whoop, whoop. And it's in this definitive vegan and animal-friendly lifestyle guide, he explores the deeply transformative experience of visiting the sanctuary and its profound effects on people's lives. And we felt that today just by being here and being in his presence, but also being here with something that he created and being with the beautiful animals. So Gene, come on up. Before I leave, unfortunately, I have to leave. Come on up. I have to get up super ridiculously early in the morning, so I've got to drive back. And but I'm really excited to share this tomorrow on KTLA. But just from a personal point of view, I want to say thank you from my heart to you, that you're like a new friend and you've influenced me a lot. I don't know why I'm getting upset, but I just made, Rich, you started it. But it's such a beautiful night that we're all here, and so I made a huge decision while I was sitting there while Rich was talking. My grandmother has made a banana pudding all our lives, and I'm responsible for making the banana pudding every year, and I'm not going to make it this year. I'm going to try to make it vegan or raw. And I'm going to get in trouble, but I'm going to do a new tradition like you've done new traditions here. Because of you. Thank you. And will you sign my book? Sorry, I got so emotional. What the heck? Thank you. You guys be safe going home. Thanks. Okay, bye.
Great. Thank you so much, Lou. And watch she's on live Channel 5 tomorrow morning, and some of the images of this will be on. So thank you so much, Lou, and starting new traditions. And thank you, Rich, for your amazing words up here and for your story of transformation. You know, this really is about transforming how we live on this planet, how we relate to others, and to ideally relate in a way that is humane and aligned with our humanity and our empathy and our compassion and our best angels. You know, we grow up without really thinking very much about how we eat. I mean, I grew up eating meat without thinking about it, and I was mindlessly supporting a horrible system. And most people do that without really thinking about it. And all we're asking is that people think and then ultimately make choices that we can feel good about, that are aligned with our humane values, and also aligned with our interests, to eat food that nourishes us and allows us to do amazing things like what Scott was talking about. Holy crap, run 100-mile races, 156-mile races, and what Rich did too. I mean, the Epic 5. You know, these are incredible feats, and this is all fueled with plant foods. You know, we can get everything we need, and if we can be healthy and happy and get everything we need from plant foods, why would we want to support an industry that causes such misery to other animals, that destroys the planet, that creates incredible violence in rural parts of the country? And, you know, slaughterhouses are violent places, and the violence at those places often goes home. And you have these rural communities that suffer, and there's pollution. You know, people can't even go outside and hang their clothes on the clothesline because it smells so bad and their clothes will stink. And this is an industry that bullies animals, it bullies communities, it sells stuff to consumers that make us sick. You know, and it misleads us. You know, for example, thankfully, there is more awareness about factory farming, more opposition to factory farming. People know there's something wrong with it, and too often people say, don't tell me, I don't want to know, because it is upsetting. But people know there's something wrong with factory farming. And so the industry now is starting to label products as natural to make it sound like, well, this is actually okay, it's humane. But the word natural means nothing. You can have animals raised in a factory farm, given growth hormones, given antibiotics, and the meat can be sold as natural. So a lot of these labels are ways to continue selling products, and sometimes at a higher price, and are misleading of consumers. So this is an industry that is bad to animals, it's bad to the earth, it's bad to its workers, it's bad to rural communities, it's bad to consumers. Sort of like the tobacco industry was some years ago, and there was that iconic image of like the executives at the tobacco companies standing in front of Congress and saying, oh, this doesn't hurt, you know, this doesn't cause illness. I mean, the meat industry is somewhat in a similar position now. You know, and as Juliana was talking about, so many problems, health problems that are common in this country can be shifted by eating a whole foods, plant-based diet. Now, I'll also say that you can be a vegan and eat Oreos and Coke. So just vegan isn't the only answer. It's important to eat well, to eat good food, because the way we eat does become part of our body. And if we're eating junk, it affects us. On today's farms where animals are exploited, bad has become normal. The animals are seen as commodities, not as living, feeling creatures. They put them in these small cages where they can't move for their whole lives. They're fed antibiotics, and then they're killed young, because in some cases they wouldn't survive very long. You know, chickens raised for meat, for example, are killed at 6 weeks old. They grow twice as big, twice as fast as normal. They die of heart attacks in a few weeks. Every year, there's hundreds of millions of these chickens that actually die of heart attacks because they grow so fast and so large, their hearts and lungs can't support them. And that sickness, in some way, parallels our problems with obesity and the problems we have. We are what we eat. You know, physically, I'd say emotionally, and spiritually. You know, what we do to others has profound consequences. And when we abuse other animals, there's a desire not to see ourselves as meat. So we start coming up with all kinds of crazy delusions and start rationalizing behavior that is just cruel and should stop. You know, like the image that was shown of the turkeys in that factory farm. That is the way these animals live, and in some cases they even live more confined in cages where they can't even turn around. And so when we start doing this to others, you know, what is the psychological impact? We start making excuses and saying things, well, they're dumb. In the case of turkeys, there's this myth that goes around that they're so dumb that they go outside in the rain and they'll drown. So we start now denigrating the victims who we are abusing to make ourselves feel better. But it really cuts into our ability to open our hearts and have empathy. So this is another way that this industry, you know, harms us, I would say psychologically, because it closes us down, and we then start judging and denigrating the victims of our abuse. And so this is a whole other psychological aspect, and when you do that, I think it has broader sort of spiritual implications, like what kind of planet are we creating? And you know, we have a lot of control, you know, our species does, and have a lot of impact on the planet. But we also have to realize that we are part of this planet. And you know, it may seem that we have a lot of power and we're going to do certain things, and I think essentially if we do destroy the planet, what we basically do is destroy our ability to live on it. I think the planet will continue. We might just create a lot of harm and misery and suffering for ourselves and others. But in the world we live in, and with the industries we're up against, who are very influential in Washington, D.C. and in state capitals, you know, it sometimes feels frustrating to challenge them and to stop the abuses that they are waging every day on animals and the planet. And so we sometimes feel like, well, what can I do? But every day, each of us, and this sort of speaks to what others have said, each day we make choices about what we eat. And those choices have profound consequences. And the reason these industries are so powerful in Washington is because people are buying their stuff and funding those industries, who now have resources to go and invest in politics. If instead of putting this money into these abusive industries, consumers start shifting, and we are seeing it now. The number of animals being killed in the US has started going down. The number of vegan and vegetarian restaurants is exploding, as Juliana was talking about earlier. And as this happens, as consumers start shifting how we vote with our dollars, these alternative, more sustainable, more conscientious businesses will start having more influence in our political system. And that is now starting to happen. There's some innovative companies now. There's a company called Hampton Creek, and some of you have possibly heard about their product called Just Mayo. It's a vegan mayonnaise. They were recently sued by Hellmann's and Unilever because they're concerned that Just Mayo is starting to cut into their profit margin. So you have these kinds of innovations going on. Companies like Beyond Meat that is producing meat at a less of a cost because it requires fewer resources than animal flesh, and they are now starting to compete head-to-head in the marketplace. So we are at a time now where we have opportunities like never before. And for people who are vegan, it's easier than ever before. But for people who aren't vegan, there are these options now. And in the case of milk, this is a whole nother one. Cow's milk, the consumption of that is going down, and the consumption of almond milk and soy milk and coconut milk, all these plant-based milks is increasing. And even the dairy industry recognizes this. They're starting now to invest in these things. So, you know, the industry is basically amoral. It really just wants to make money. It doesn't really care if animals are abused if it makes a lot of money. It doesn't care if animals are not abused if it makes a lot of money. So as we start shifting the way we spend our dollars, we can have profound impacts, and those are actually starting to happen. And so, like the tobacco industry, when it was having a hard time selling its products here, it started looking for export markets, which is sadly part of what animal agriculture is now doing, and animal food consumption is increasing in some other countries, sadly. This is a global issue. We need to be aware of all the problems wherever they occur, but ultimately, where we have the most control is right in our country first, in our community, and with ourselves. You know, one of my mantras is you can't control others, you can only control yourself. And each of us, you know, plays a role in this. And for me, it does my heart a lot of good just to be here with you all, and to share this meal with you all, and to share this day with you all, and to share this time and the opportunities we have to create change. And I hope many of you took lots of pictures out on the farm and took pictures of the food, and we'll share that. You know, we are social animals. We tend to do what those around us do. You know, that's when I grew up eating meat, it was because everybody around me was doing it, and I just started doing it. As more and more people show up to dinner and don't eat meat, that's just going to rub off on other people. You know, we do influence those around us just by our actions, just by the way we behave on a daily basis. And as the Thanksgiving Day approaches now, you know, some of us might be in a challenging situation where we're going to our family's event and there's like a dead bird in the middle of the table. So what are we going to do about it, right? Now, the young vegan in me way back when would have come in and turned over the table. Well, not quite, but sort of. That's probably not going to be the most effective approach. So how do we deal with that? Maybe if you have a picture of a turkey you took here, bring that. See, I'll bring the turkey this year, don't worry about that, and I'll bring the turkey, bring the picture. Or bring this Wellington, this Native Foods Wellington we had here today. That was a pretty amazing centerpiece kind of vegan holiday roast. So there's those kinds of things we can bring and show that this is about abundance. It's not about giving things up. It's about choosing to live in a way that is aligned with our values and aligned with our humanity, aligned with our compassion and our empathy. And who's against that? Also, it's about living in a way that is aligned with our interests, to eat food that's actually good for us. You know, if you step back and think about how we eat in this country, we eat food that makes us sick. I mean, looking at that rationally, it's kind of crazy. We eat food that makes us sick. You know, Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine. And it can be our medicine, or it can be our poison. Why do we want to keep eating this poison? Just because we grew up doing it? Well, that's the reason most people do it. We grew up doing it, and then change is scary, right? You know, well, where am I going to get my protein? We hear this over and over, and people are genuinely worried about it because we've been bombarded with this notion you need to get protein from animal sources. But Juliana pointed out that, look, from plant foods you get plenty of protein and every other nutrient you need as well, except B12, so good to take the supplements. So, you know, we can make choices that have profound impacts personally and beyond that, economically as well. And change is afoot, change is happening, and this event is part of it. It is an enormous honor to be here with you all. And I'll also just close on one story about just what we ultimately do at Farm Sanctuary is we try to change how we relate to other animals. And, you know, when it comes to farm animals, most of the time the way people relate to them is by eating them without really thinking about them. So obviously here we're modeling a different kind of relationship. When we first started, we had to deal with veterinarians who were not very familiar with our sort of vegan mentality. And we would rescue animals from dead piles. You know, they were thrown away, they were worth nothing economically. We would bring them to the vet, and the vet would say, well, what are you spending so much money on this sheep for? It's not worth anything. And we'd say, look, for us, this sheep is not an economic commodity. We're not looking at an investment here. We're looking at an individual animal who we want to help. So finally, the veterinarians started taking care of and treating the sheep and the goats and the pigs and the other very sick animals we were bringing in. And although they were worth nothing economically, we were spending money on them, and the vets came to accept that as, well, okay, that's how these people think about these animals, we'll do it. After a while, we called the vet because there was a rat who lived on the farm who was pretty sick. And so now we're starting to push them a little bit more. And the vets were pretty tentative about talking to us about this rat, but they finally said, so, okay, they agreed to look at the rat. We brought the rat in, who was in bad shape, and they euthanized the rat because he was suffering and was not going to be able to recover. A couple weeks after that, our sheep had parasites. They had worms. So I got one of the worms and I called the vet. And I said, I have this worm here. And there was a very long silence on the other end of the phone. And in sort of stalling language, said, what do you want us to do for that worm? And then, you know, I explained that the worm was a parasite and we needed medicine for the sheep. And so we got the medicine for the sheep. So we kind of drew the line at the worm. But the bottom line is, as vegans, you know, we try to do the best we can. The world is not a perfect place. And so for me, being vegan is an aspiration to live as well as possible, to live in harmony and in kinship with the other creatures we share this planet with, and to inspire others to be the best humans they can be. And it's wonderful to be here with you all. We're all part of this together. We're all part of this process. We help each other. We support each other. We nourish each other in various ways. And we are changing the world. So thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, Jean.